Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another Taking Imperfect Action. As always, I'm Jamie, Siad's on the other side of the stream, and we are the little duo that could, duo Charango. We're super excited for our guest today because they have written a piece for both of us and our little solo projects independently. And as while we love all of the people that are on this show, this is particularly special to us, and so we were super thrilled when they agreed to do this. Um, it's always exciting when people who work in a bunch of different mediums agree to do open-ended project because you never really know what you're going to get. And today we are excited to take a listen to Yaz's set of music for violin and film. So without further ado, here is Yaz Lancaster.
Sometimes when I'm anxious on the subway, I count the blue things. I don't know how much it helps, but it gives me something to do.
I've been trying to shift and revise, I guess, the ways that I think about what changes and what sometimes I feel like it has to be in order to be real, and whatever real means, real change. I am learning what value there is in just going outside and feeling fresh air and seeing things you haven't seen before, experiencing people you haven't experienced before.
See people that are close to me, but this year I haven't really been able to go anywhere.
I think that I'm a lot more intentional now about who I spend my time with.
this moment hasn't been the ultimate test of just release and understanding what I can do.
Not I, you idiot. Not self. But we. We. Waves of sky blue like a critique of heaven. Why do you treasure your voice when to be one thing is to be next to nothing? Why do you look up? To hear an echo like the voice of God? You are all the same to us. Solitary, standing above us, planning your silly lives. You go where you are sent, like all things, where the wind plants you. One or another of you, forever looking down and seeing some image of water and hearing what? Waves. And over waves, birds singing. Not I, not self, but we. Waves of sky blue like a critique of heaven. Why do you treasure your voice when to be one thing is to be next to nothing? Why do you look up? To hear an echo like the voice of God? You are all the same to us. Solitary, standing above us, planning your silly lives. You go We are sent, like all things, with limitations. One another who, forever looking down, seeing some image of water, and hearing it, waves, and over waves, birds sing.
Woohoo! Woohoo! Congrats! Like I said in an email to Yaz, that set we really appreciate because it very serendipitously touches a lot of things that we've been doing in our personal and collective work lately, and so it's really nice to tie all those things together. Um, this is kind of a hard question to ask, but it's a question we asked Julie last time, and it seems fitting to ask you this as well. But I know that when other composers and performers and creators start working on a project, often people say like, "Oh, everything I do, I start with the piano," or "Everything I do, I start with the guitar," or whatever. So for you, I guess, as someone who works across so many different mediums, do you have a starting point or a particular thing that influences the direction of your work as you go along?
Yeah. I think I actually work on paper a lot. Not really like in the traditional sense. Like I don't use like manuscript paper or like lined paper or anything like that. For all my projects, for both composition and poetry, I just have like this blank little journal. And I really just sort of collect fragments or bits and pieces of things, or that's where I sort out the form of my works. Um, but yeah, it's definitely always on some sort of like actual like blank page, or sometimes Google Docs if I'm working like on a laptop. But yeah.
Cool. And you said an important word as it relates to your work in that answer of fragments. And I know, like, very briefly a few months ago we talked about this, but I guess the question would be why fragments? Like, what about fragments stands out to you, and like, why do you like working with those?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure like why I'm so like drawn to it, but I know like when I first started writing poetry, that's primarily how I worked. Like I would just have like this little notebook that I carry around everywhere, and I like write down like phrases or like little things, or like found text if I'm like walking around, or like street names and like all this stuff, and then I'd come back and like have a piece of paper that has like all these random like words, and it's just, I think it was sort of fun, like a puzzle for me to like put together like how I can
Yeah.
connect all these things. um, and when I moved to writing music, I think I was still thinking in that context of I like so many different types of music, and I listen to so much music and perform like so much music that um, it's just more fun for me to like work in like these fragments of like things that I really like or I'm interested in.
Yeah. And I guess to that point, something that I noticed in the video, and to continue this theme of like tying all these shows together, we were talking to Cassie, in fact, about this a couple of weeks ago. But I noticed something that you said about like being present in the performance, and of course, in your answer there's an element of like being attentive to the moment. And what I was telling Cassie is like, man, like my brain is just out of it right now. So I guess, like, do you have any advice for those of us who are seeking to be more aware of the present?
I actually think like maybe sort of the opposite thing that you would think to do is like taking breaks and like not being present will allow you to have that space and like ability to allow yourself to be present. I definitely am taking way more breaks now. Like I hardly work like nearly as much as I used to when I was like in New York or in school. Um, and just like allowing yourself to rest and think and not always do, I find is really good, at least for me.
Sure. I think that's always my goal, and then whatever happens. Um, Siad and I kind of talk about this like sort of like resistance we found in school, and sometimes outside of school in like professional world, to like fragmented careers. And I know, for example, if I had arranged Brockhampton for steel pans at U of L, like we probably would have gotten laughed out of the guitar studio, not because the project is invalid, but just because people only wanted us to play like our little nylon guitars. And so I guess I wonder, like, have you encountered that sort of thing in your career? I guess I'm sure we all have to some extent, but like, to what degree, and like, how have you like managed to persevere?
I'm not sure that I have like any specific moments where I felt that was happening.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like I probably like the closest thing to that would be like pursuing new or contemporary music as like a violinist, or like you know, sometimes there's those teachers that are just not into it and they just want you to do Bach and Mozart and that thing. But I feel like I've been pretty fortunate with teachers who sort of let me branch out into the music that I'm doing now. So
that's awesome, because I feel like we didn't necessarily have that experience, but we don't need to go there right now. We just wrapped up Poetry Month, which came and went so quickly, and I guess we always kind of like to ask questions about what people like and are into. So I know that we have some people who like poetry as well, who listen to these things. So if you could give us like three poems, or not poems, like three poets or like texts, or just give us some recommendations is what
sure. First one, I would definitely say Kyle Carrera Lopez. We're mutual online friends, but he's been doing a lot of really great work, and a lot of Spanish and English poems that are really wonderful. I think he was actually just in the poetry magazine from this month, or the last issue of that. So that's where you can find his work. Bailey Cohen Vera, who's a close friend of mine, who I actually just finished setting some of his work for a piece that I was working on for the past year. He's also working a lot in Spanish and English and translations, and is really great. And here's one more. Oh, I just got, I used to work at the Poetry Project in New York. They're like a community poetry reading and sort of, yeah, like a poetry reading and promoting organization in Manhattan. And Nicole Wallace was one of my coworkers there, and she has a collection of work that is, I believe it's both in English and her indigenous language, which I'm blanking on right now. But yeah, I just got, she sent me her chapbook, and I've seen like some poems, some excerpts from it, and it's really wonderful. So
right on. Sharp turn, but in the line of recommendations here, you're vegan, correct?
Yes.
give us we'll stick with three. Three is a beautiful number. Give us your top 3 vegan recipes, because we again have people who don't eat meat in the chat.
Okay, what have I just made? I just made yesterday some udon noodles. I really like don't follow recipes. I just sort of like read the title of it and just go like, okay, I can sort of guess what's in that. But it's udon noodles with teriyaki sauce and onions, jalapenos, garlic. And I did like 2 types of cauliflower, just like fresh cauliflower, and then I found like those cauliflower wings that you can get like in the frozen section. So I did that. It's pretty good. Definitely recommend. What else do I eat?
I love that tweet that's always like, did anyone even ask cauliflower if I wanted to be all these things?
It's really good. It's really versatile too. Oh, I just discovered on TikTok, actually, someone was making eggs, and instead of like using oil or like anything like butter in the pan first, they use pesto. And I have like that vegan egg replacer called Just Egg, and it doesn't really work like like sunny side up or anything. It's more of like a scrambled egg thing, but it's good for omelets. So that with pesto is pretty good. I don't know, what else do I eat? Whatever I eat is usually, it starts with like onions, garlic, and jalapenos. And I feel like you can't go wrong with those three.
That's perfect, because my final thing I was going to ask before I give it over to Siad was like, a delivery person drops off 1 pound of jalapenos at your door right now. What are you doing with them?
I'd probably like use at least 4 in whatever I'm about to cook. So
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed at how many times I've like been using jalapenos in a dish and then touched my eye.
oh no.
They've just like been down for the count for like 10 minutes.
For me, it's like cutting garlic. Like I hate like if you touch it, your hand smells like garlic for like the next 3 days.
Yes.
So I started wearing like gloves when I do that.
I'm really curious about your relationship and connection to nature in your work. If you feel like there's a big connection there or not so big, but like I know on the score of the piece you wrote for me, there's like this big wonderful picture of what I think is like a turnip plant patch green thing, and then I know like in some of the videos that you showed us there's like outside and like found things. So I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Yeah. I've always loved being in nature and like doing stuff outside. And I feel like there's sort of like this nostalgia tied to that of like being a kid and like playing outside until like your parents yell to come inside and eat dinner or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I've always like felt a connection to being in nature and like really enjoy it. And I think more so now it's more of like a imperative thing that like the environment is changing and climate change is like a very real thing, and that we don't really spend that much time, or we don't get the chance to spend that much time in nature. So I'm always looking to it for inspiration and ways to like connect with it in ways that aren't destructive, since everything else seems to be so destructive whenever we interact with it.
Mm-hmm. How do you approach being present in nature, but also trying to like capture inspiration from it? Like, especially if you're shooting a video or something, like how do you say like, oh, I'm looking at it through this, but I'm also thinking about how it's going to look in 6 months to the person who's interacting with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, that's an interesting question of like shooting it or like presenting it as it was then. But I think that also can go back to like that connection to nostalgia of like when the way that things were before, sort of thing. But I think the question of like being present is like allowing yourself to notice things that you wouldn't normally notice, and allowing yourself to just sort of be in that moment rather than trying to like look for things. When I'm writing or thinking about ways that I want to bring in natural elements or things from nature into my work, it's usually not in those environments, because I am like letting myself be present in those moments, and that it usually happens like here, like at my desk when I'm like back inside, that I'm like really going through and like finding specific things to pull from. I actually do a lot of like just random Google searches, which I think is like the like main reason that like I have a lot of work that's like centered on nature, because I always find like really interesting facts and stuff online, and I'm like, oh, that's like really cool, and I want to think about that, or I want to write about that. And also just a lot of places or like experiences that I haven't had, like in my big guitar solo piece that I wrote 2 or 3 years ago now, there's like a line in it it's talking about wanting to see the glaciers, and it's like things that are disappearing now because of climate change and all that, and just like wanting to see those things for myself in person, and just like yeah, I don't know.
I know that Jamie and I are both into video and like how does that interact with our music and stuff like that. But like, how did you come to discover video as part of your practice? And I'm also curious as to if you've ever been working on a piece that you wanted to do that included video, and the performer just was like, "Do video," or something like that. Like, does that happen? Like, or are people like far nicer than I'm?
Yeah, so a lot of the video or like fixed media elements, visual fixed media elements, are sort of things that happen after the fact, and it's sort of like a way to present the music, usually online. Like for the past year, a lot of things have been online, and I think within the last 2 or so years, I've been getting more into visuals and like other ways of presenting things, mostly because just sort of taking advantage of the virtual platforms that we have now and trying to do things and experiment with things that maybe wouldn't work so well in a live performance, or would be sort of like I don't know, just sort of like additive and not like the main focus of a live performance. Um, yeah, I just really like thinking about ways that can make a virtual space more interesting, and it's also just fun to make visuals.
I think Jamie and I said the other day that like solo electric guitar is like one of the most boring things to ever watch someone do, and so we're like, how can we make this something that's like more enjoyable, especially in this digital space, like you kind of mentioning and bringing up. So it's cool to know that that's something you're interested in and that people seem really open to. So I wanted to ask, this is kind of like the last thing I wanted to ask, and I am curious as to how much issues of the world, and you kind of talked about this, but how much issues of the world influence your work, just like in all of the different parts. So you've mentioned climate change, but I believe we have a mutual love for the book "The Revolution Will Not Be Funded Beyond the Nonprofit Industrial Complex."
It's literally right here. It's
and
literally on my desk.
and sounds for Bale or music for Bale. I'm sorry if I've missaid their name, but they're the project that works with musicians and artists to advocate for the abolition of bail and prisons and all of that. And so I'm just curious as to how you find that comes into your work, if at all, because it totally might.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first place I start, I mentioned like I start everything on paper. I think even before that, I'm thinking of what I want to say in that moment. Like that's probably the first thing or the first question I have when I'm starting a new project is what do I have to say and how can I present this? So a lot of that time, or a lot of the times, that does lead me to bringing in some sort of like political or social issues or concepts into my work. Um, and I think now I'm at the point where I feel like awareness uh, is not really the place I want to bring my work, because I think a lot of the time people are aware of most of the issues. And I think now I'm sort of just refocusing the ways in which my work can either bring about a direct action or an ideological stance or way of thinking for the performers and the audience. And also just thinking about the spaces that my work is presented in, and the way it's presented, and all of that, I think, is what I'm looking to more so now, especially within the past year.
Awesome. Thanks.
Am I supposed to wrap it up? Is that
Yeah.
okay? Okay. I always forget that. It always becomes awkward. Yes, we're so thankful for you as always, for both your creativity in the set and for the other things that you've done for us in the past year or so. If you enjoyed today, Yas has another gig like this at the end of May, and they keep a very meticulously well organized website. So feel free to check out Yas Lancaster's website. Lancaster.com. There we go.
Yes.
I was blanking on the hyphen. Again, thank you so much, everyone, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Until next time, we're Duo Charango.